I am going to shave. I just haven't done it yet. And you might notice maybe up here there's some hairs off the ear. This is something that happens when you get older in my age range, is that hair just starts growing in all sorts of places, and you have to spend a lot of time, grooming it off. I'm thankful that I'm nearly bald, because then that takes care of having to go to a hairstylist and having them to cut your hair. It's If you want to cut back on the expenses of haircuts, I would highly suggest going bald, because it's so much easier to get some electric clippers and go right over the hair and just get rid of it. Um, I can do it because I've got balding. I'm not going to get hair here at all. And it's all going to grow back here, and so you get some electric clippers, and it only takes about 5 minutes or less to shave off all the hair off the head with electric clippers. I used to do it with a razor blade, when I was really interested in cutting it down to the skin. Um, Take a Mach 3 and just go shh, 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 shh. The only problem with that is that you have a tendency to risk getting a cut. And if you make the mistake of, instead of going straight away, you go a little bit to the side, you're going to get a cut on your scalp, and then you're going to have to figure out where that cut is, put a band-aid on it, or, I don't have styptic pencils or anything like that, so I don't do that. And besides, I wouldn't be able to know where it was exactly. And so it's a complete pain to use a Mach 3 to shave your head. Um, it's possible, but it's a waste of time. So these days, all I do is I just use an electric clipper, and I just shave it down as far as I can get it, and it's just a stub on the top, and that's enough for me. Um, there, the people in the video games, since I'm so old, they can't believe that guys my age play the video games they play. And the thing they don't understand is that I was born in 1970, and 1970 was the first year that the first microchip was created. And about 2 or 3 years later, um, they made game consoles. And the Atari 2600 came out in, what was it, 74 or 75, something like that. And so I got an Atari 2600, and then I would get video games, and Space Invaders came out in 78 or 77. Galaxian was 78 or 79. Galaga was 81. Xevious was 83 or so, 82. Um, game Tron came out in 83, and around that time Star Wars and Tempest, and pretty much all the video games that we know from the 80s came out before 86. And then 87 came out the Nintendo NES system, which I bought because I was waiting for my Amiga computer to get delivered, and so I bought myself a Nintendo NES to satisfy my time until I got the Amiga. And then I spent time on the Amiga, and by 1988 I graduated from high school, and I went to college. And while in college, I was using the Amiga up until about 1995. I started using Windows 98 or 95, and an old Amiga, and I was using SGI graphics workstations in college. I learned 3D software with Wavefront TAV in 96, or in 90, also in 95. I got an animation award from, well, no, I didn't get an animation award. I got uh, recognition from guys at Pixar, because my instructor took my animation Rise of the Thorax to Pixar, and they thought it was really cool, which made me stoked and making me think I was going to get a job at Pixar. And 95 was also the year that they released Toy Story. So I got to know some of the people that made Toy Story um, before Toy Story was released. And there was only 50 people working on that full time. So Pixar really, I mean, a lot of people in the 3D animation industry were saying, "Oh, they're never going to release an entire movie that's computer generated." You know, it's just it would take forever at the resolutions they would need to satisfy people in a movie theater, and they did it. And they did it once more. They did something more impossible that nobody ever thought would be possible, is to create a a not a photorealistic, but photorealistic movie without ray tracing. Because for a long time, people believed that ray tracing was the only way you could simulate light inside of a computer animation. And the big problem with ray tracing is that it's not ray tracing. It isn't tracing from lights to the camera. It's tracing from the camera to the lights. And because of that, the effects that you get out of ray tracing are incorrect. Um, the only so eye rays go out of the camera and they bounce off the objects, and what gets contributed to the image is when those eye rays hit lights or are approximately in the direction of a light. And the thing you don't get is what's called ambient light, or you don't get light that bounces off surfaces. So if you if you're in the sunlight and you're under a tree, in ray tracing in a computer, you would not be seen, because what lights you under the tree is not the sunlight because you're in the shadow, but the light that reflects off of the grass onto you. And so that's secondary light. You don't get secondary light from ray tracing. And so, how do you get that secondary light? You get it through something called radiosity. And so the only way to get a really good looking scene is from using radiosity, which takes for friggin' ever. Plus the ray tracing takes forever, friggin' ever to get simulated, and it isn't even correct, 100% correct. Or you can get some artist to spend a lot of time on things called shaders. And nobody knew what shaders were until Pixar started making a program called RenderMan. And it's their RenderMan that they made Toy Story with. And all it is it's a program that doesn't use ray tracing. It uses programs um, that use like vector algebra to allow artists to paint scenes according to what artists the tools the techniques that artists use to make things look real. And um and so when you look at Mr. Potato Head, um the his ears have 80 lights around them. They have artists that are trying to determine when those lights come on or off on the ears based upon the environment. So they're using vector math to tell the lights around Mr. Potato Head's ears to turn to light or unlight based upon the orientation and relationship of Mr. Potato Head to other objects that are in the scene. And the focus is trying to make things look artistically, aesthetically pleasing in the movie, but without trying to be accurate. Because if you were it, because the example they give is the reflection um, of Buzz Lightyear's face on his helmet from the inside, showing his face with ray tracing. You would not see his face. You would see a distorted image. But how they get his face inside the helmet is by creating a shader that they custom tune so that they get his face in the helmet, so people can see his face and not the distorted image that would be there. And all shading is about is trying to satisfy uh, the eye. It's not about accuracy. It's about getting what you want, not what is precise. And so there are a lot of things that physically perfect ways of representing the world. There are a lot of things that you just don't get unless you can somehow fudge it artistically, and that's what Pixar's Render Man permitted them to do. And Toy Story was created with Render Man and their shader system. And today, your graphics cards use an offshoot of Pixar's RenderMan shader system. This is what happened. In around 95, 96, somewhere in there, a guy came out with a freeware package called Blue Moon Rendering Tools, and he took the Pixar shading language and he applied it to his rendering system so that he could have all of the things that were in RenderMan, and then he added ray tracing on top of that so that if you wanted ray tracing you could use it. Pixar had a bone to pick with that, and it infringed on their patent for RenderMan. So they carried him to court, and they were going to sue him. And Nvidia got wind of it, and they came in and they saved this guy's ass. They paid for they paid for the settlement to Pixar, and they got this guy to work for them and develop the shader system that Nvidia uses in their graphics cards. And that's right now the way that all computer graphics are done for video games, is the use of shaders. And these shaders are defined in the way that RenderMan would do it. And so your video games now, all your video games benefit from the research and development that Pixar did for RenderMan, indirectly through this guy that made BMRT, that went to court, that then ended up working for Nvidia. And John Carmack, whenever it was released, John Carmack was I guess hired or was working with Nvidia or whatever to put out the a version of Doom that used this shader system, and he exploited it to show all the things he could do, like fake glass and real time lighting, shape lighting with colors and radiosity like effects and junk. But John Carmack was trying to push an open shading language, and he was trying to push an open shading language, whereas Microsoft was pushing DirectX, 3D, whatever, and using their kind of shader system. And So the thing is that I don't know what the progress of it is as of yet, but um, computer graphics have come a long way since that stuff hit the scene. The only reason we even have real time 3D graphics is because of SGI and Microsoft finagling, actually kind of kicking SGI's ass to try to get them to release a cheap alternative for families and regular consumers, and SGI not being able to offer it. What Microsoft did is they basically uh, pretended to work with SGI while at the same time developing their own solution, gleaning from what SGI was telling them about how the real time 3D graphics was done, and providing their own solution, or getting developers and creating into their operating system all the stuff that was in OpenGL and the SGIs, and then delivering it to people with the moniker DirectX 3D. And after like 2000 whatever, um, SGI was ditched by everybody because their computers cost way too much. And thankfully to the video game industry, everybody has really cheap 3D real time 3D graphics cards and console game systems where PlanetSide 2, no SGI Onyx could ever render like stuff like PlanetSide 2 in it. And I mean, the Onyxes in 95 were, I mean, in 98 or whatever, were fantastic computers. These days are shit, they wouldn't even compare to a video game machine. And so everybody's so thankful that SGI is no longer in the world. However, we have to admit, SGI were the first guys to create real time 3D. They were the guys that came up with the machine that could do it. And so in 95, the only way you could do that was with an SGI. And that SGI is the reason why Blender 3D exists, is that Ton Rosendahl, the guy who created Blender 3D, it's a free 3D animation package, by the way, he was he was doing the logic of, okay, I can buy an SGI workstation for $5,000 or $10,000, or I could buy for $5,000. I could get a seat of Maya, and so he said, okay, or Wavefront TV at the time, but he needed to get an SGI and some 3D animation package so that he could do his kind of animation stuff that he was doing in his media company in the Netherlands. And so what he did is he said, "Oh, I dropped something." What he said is he didn't see any point in buying Maya, and he needed the SGIs, and they were a certainty, and Maya was not so much of a certainty. So he figured, what I'll do is I'll make my own 3D. I'll make the 3D software I need to do what I need to do, because it's basically just OpenGL, right, and some extra um, extra analytical geometry, or vector math, and it shouldn't be too hard to do my own, to roll my own, since the SGI does the real time 3D graphic stuff, and I know a little bit about rendering. I'll just put the two together and make my own 3D package, my in-house 3D package. And that's what he did, and then so he spent his money on the SGI hardware. So if the SGI hardware didn't cost an arm and a leg to buy, he wouldn't have created that 3D software that he did. And so SGI is to blame for a lot of things. SGI is to blame for the reason why Alias and Wavefront and Thompson Digital Images came together to create Maya. Um, Microsoft is to blame for making SGI do that because they took and bought Softimage up, and SGI was scared shitless, so they bought up all the other 3D competitors to Softimage, and they made Maya to compete with Softimage. Microsoft then determined, before Maya was ever released, that Softimage didn't have great return on investment, and so they ditched Softimage and they pursued SGI to try to develop DirectX 3D so that they could offer a product to the wide consumer base, and that is what is in our video games. Our video games drove the 3D, real-time 3D graphics industry. Video games were the money maker that was going to drive all the research and development of fast graphics cards. But when Microsoft came into the 3D industry, they were trying to determine what the money maker was, and they determined that 3D animation software wasn't it. And so but it was SGI's cash cow to have 3D software, because it's what was causing people to buy their workstations, because at the time in the mid-90s, that was the only way to do real-time 3D. And so they had a monopoly for much of the 90s on real-time 3D graphics. Before SGI, it was not possible to do that. They used something called Painter's algorithm, which had the problem that if you had a big old floor with one polygon, how do you determine which way to draw the scene such that the stuff at the forefront, that most of the floor is at the front, would cause in Painter's algorithm to have the floor drawn over the walls and the lower end of the walls, and things that might be underneath and behind. So it's Painter's algorithm is it just draws all the stuff that's in front. If it draws all the things from the back to the front, but if most of your polygon is in the front, say the floor, than it is in the back, it's going to draw over stuff like chairs and stuff that are in the back of the room. If you're at a certain position where you're looking at most of the floor. So anyhow, Painter's algorithm was incorrect. What SGI did is they drew all the triangles that were in the scene, and they used a thing called a Z buffer to determine which pixels were at the front, and if there was a pixel that was closer to the if the pixel that was to be drawn was behind the stuff that's in the Z buffer, it wouldn't be drawn. And so it cut down on the number of things, it cuts down on the lighting of pixels on the screen that won't be seen. There's a number of ways to do that. But anyhow, I got into 3D graphics in the 90s, and I was talking about video games, being involved with video games, and when the video games are using all the stuff that in 3D graphics, real-time 3D graphics is doing all the stuff you wanted to do whenever you first saw Tron and you wanted to do ray tracing and animation and stuff, and it's doing it in real time in a video game, and you're from the video game generation, you're going to be playing 3D video games until you die, because that's just as fascinating as the first time you saw Tron. So don't think that for a minute that video games are for children. It's for every friggin' person, all the way up to the people that were playing video games in the 70s. I mean, if you were a 20-something, no, 30-something certainly wasn't playing video games. But a 20-something, somebody in college that had extra time on their hands, or somebody who was just starting to just starting their career, um, 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 who was just getting into the um, workforce, they would be jaded and pissed off that they were waiting tables, but in that little cafe was a video game machine, and so what would they be doing on their off time? Playing the video game machine because it's so fascinating. Those guys were probably in their 20s in the early 70s, and so just do the math. It is now 2022. A guy who was 20 in the 70s, say, he was 15 in 1970. Okay. So 15 in my age, right now 52, plus 15 is 67 years old. So people who are 67 and even older people were starting to really get into games. Like the lady who mastered Hubert is like 70 some odd years old now. And so to say that people can't be really old and play video games is completely bullshit. Um, these same people don't see any value in playing baseball or football or any of the other stuff because it's so bland and boring and dismal and lacks the dimension of a RTS, FPS, MMO like Planet Site 2. And that's the reason why I play that game, is because it's got so much more excitement and dimension and technique and strategy than any game of chess, Go, or anything you can get on a board game altogether. Um, and they try for it in role playing games inside of the malls on with those six-sided die, and those things are not even real time enough to be RTS that's in Planet Side 2. And so it's an FPS, first person shooter, RTS, real time strategy, MMO, uh, uh, multiplayer, multiple multiplayer online, or something like that. Massively multiplayer online. And it's got RPG role playing game aspect to it a little bit too, but not really. It's trying to do it, but it's kind of stupid. And there's probably some other acronyms in there that it represents, but um, nothing else exists that does this. Certainly not MMO FPS. There's nothing that does that. There is, but it's stupid as hell. It's stuff like Eve Online and junk like that. No Man's Sky is kind of that way, but nobody on No Man's Sky is going to ever meet each other because of the way it's designed. And uh, Minecraft could even be classified as an MMO FPS, but not really an RTS because the maps are infinite. And so, anyhow, the thing is that I play video games. I shave my head, and I got these stubble on my face. And I don't know if that was what I was really aiming to talk about today on the video here. But that's kind of how it's gone, and I put up the 3D stuff, more VR 180. I'm planning to just keep exploiting the stupid camera, even though I really don't have much subject material to give you guys. And I mean, some people like my scene, but the thing is that the things that you can do are always more, are either more something you're into, or it's more, or it's something that other people think is fantastic that you're willing to do, but you're not quite as satisfied doing it all the time as you are doing something else. And one of the reasons why I believe Robin Williams committed suicide was that he came to the realization that because of the disease he had, he was unable to play video games because that was his cathartic. catharsis. And if you don't believe that to be the case, keep in mind that he named his daughter Zelda after Legend of Zelda. And so I believe that he could see himself. No, there's the water that fell over. He could see himself not being able to do the things he wanted to do as a result of this disease, and he decided to end it quickly. And there are Christians out there that would say, "Oh, he's going to hell because he committed suicide." You could die by any number of ways, and I mean, God's not going to sit there and say, "Well, you committed suicide, you deserve hell." It's the thing that's stupid about that is that killing is a sin, but everything's a sin, and things don't go the way things are planned, but God doesn't really slam you on the they doesn't slam you to hell for one sin, and dying or killing yourself isn't any more a sin than any other sin. It's all sin. It's all against God's will, but God gives everybody free will, and God's not going to be involved in preventing people from doing things like killing themselves, and it's up to God to determine where they go, with that, and the thing is that we probably don't even realize that there may not be what's we really don't know what goes on after death. We have our hunches, but we don't really know. And so the people that are judgmental of other people to say you're going to hell or something like that is pretty much trying to put God in a box and saying this is what God is going to do to you. And God's like, no, I'm not. And I'm sure that just pisses off God no end to let people on earth damn other people to hell on earth whenever God hasn't even made the choice yet about what should happen to anyone. And we don't even know the choices God's going to make. We can only think that we know. And if you really look at close to the Christian religion, it's really about trying to make people, try to get people to stop trying to make God do stuff for them, to stop getting into these stupid cults and religions that try to gain control over the metaphysical. Because that's what people long for, is they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and they want to somehow guarantee it's going to go their way, and so they're going to make sacrifices to the guy in the sky, or the multiple gods, or however they see the metaphysical, the person on the outside. And I believe that I believe in God. I believe there is one creator, but there are They're all in India. It's some of it is superstition. It's worshiping all multiple gods in order to live a happy life, to somehow have to appease all of the gods that manage all the various aspects of life, the fertility gods, and this god for that and this god for that. There's not there I don't see anything really wrong with pantheism, because to me, if you read the best out of it, if they can't really understand that there might be one God, it might be the case is that they don't see people as as one person be able to do everything, and they just don't they can't wrap their head around there being one God doing everything. Okay, and so they would have and so the thing is that they believe everybody has a skill, and that just is that idea is painted into the superstition and the pantheism that's in their culture. And so the beliefs people have is a part of their culture, and you're not really going to be able to rip that out and make it what you think is correct. And the thing is that there is there's beauty in culture and in religion because you can see that there was something that inspired them in it. The thing that really I think would discuss God, and this from my opinion, it's not that I know what God thinks or anything like that. Um, I would believe that um, what would disgust God is to have you sacrifice things on earth like babies and stuff in order to try to have some control over God. I mean, you make people and then they start killing their young to try to get you to do something. You're gonna say that's you just killed a kid and you think that somehow this is going to appease me. I was the guy who created you, you know. I was the person who created you, or the not the person. I'm, you know. I try to tell you that one thing I say is that what makes God a him or a her? Does God have sexual organs? Who is God going to have sex with in order to procreate? No, that's all of Earth here. The Creator, whoever the Creator is, and in my case, I believe it's the Christian God. Whoever the Creator is unique and goes by in the Christian world God. And I guess in Muslim it goes by God, but they have different definitions of what God is. And if you're a transgender person, they say, I don't want to be recognized by my gender. I don't want to be a him or a he. I want to be Pat or Sam or John or, you know, or some, John's not really a unisex name, but, you know, you could have a woman going by the name John, and see people want that freedom. So if you're a man and you want to be called Mary, and people would laugh at you and they'd say, "Oh, you're gay," and I say, "No, I just want to be named Mary, and I want to be recognized as Mary, not him or he." You could do that, and people would say, "Well, aren't you like gay?" And I'd say, "No, I just want to use the name Mary, and I want the freedom to be called Mary, and don't call me him or he, call me Mary." See, you could turn that on the ear to do stuff like that, and I think that's the next wave of what's going to happen in the future is that people are going to start taking on um, gender implication names as their primary names, um, rather than taking on um, genders to be in support of gender freedom. um, if you're a plus on the LGBTQ plus, and I'm a plus, you could take on having a name like Kiernan, which is my name. Kiernan is in England is considered to be a man's name, but in America, you got Kiernan Shipka, and Kiernan Shipka is a female actress. And so my name, I didn't have control over what my name was, but from the very beginning, people used to call me Karen. So I don't have any particular problem with being called anything between a male and a female's name because it's been with me from the very beginning. And so Kieran is really a Irish surname. So it's like McKiernan, you know, which is really common. McKiernan, McKevin, things like that. So I have to stop this video, otherwise it won't get put up on YouTube. Nobody's going to watch it that watches my regular videos because they like little 3-4 minute videos. Maybe they'll watch